Fall off my heels, I'm embarrassed. Well, I was asked to say a few words, and I actually don't know where to start and where to finish because there's so much to say. I'd have to cheat and read because otherwise I'll forget. First of all, I want to begin the evening by welcoming all of my fellow Jane Goodall fans and worshippers. All of us in this room have one significant thing in common, our huge admiration for Dr. Goodall. When I discovered that Jane's favorite books as a child were Tarzan and Dr. Dolittle, I knew at once that we were kindred spirits. Jane has been my idol since I was in kindergarten. And by the way, I've heard that a lot, and people here are not all 12. Often, I know there's people over 90 that still idolize you. I've always been passionate about animals, and in the majority of cases, I prefer the company of many of them over many people. The work that Dr. Goodall has done in her lifetime to preserve the world's dwindling chimpanzee population and her tireless effort to conserve the environment for the communities that must share it with them is simply said unprecedented. My daughter, husband, and I finally had the great privilege of meeting Jane Goodall 4 years ago at an event very similar to this one. We were so inspired by her that my daughter and I immediately signed up to do some volunteer work for JGI. I was approaching, believe it or not, my 50th birthday soon after we started volunteering, and my husband asked me where in the world I would like to go to celebrate it, and I immediately said, I want to go to one of Jane's sanctuaries. My husband's a very good sport. Now what was the next part? I got too excited. Oh yes, so I asked if this could happen, and my friends at JGI said, we really don't offer these trips to the public. I felt like a complete pleb. But a year later was Jane's 80th birthday, and my friends at JGI contacted me and said, it's a very special thing. We're going to celebrate Jane's 80th. So guess what? You're in. So we went last summer, and it was an unbelievable adventure that I will never forget. Our first encounter that we had with the chimpanzees was with the wild ones in Budongo Forest, which is an 850 square kilometer park. I'm going to read you an excerpt from an email I sent home to family and friends about our first encounter. Dressed like Indiana Jones, we closely followed our guides almost silently through the dense forest, ducking our heads under the low branches and thick hanging vines, being very careful to avoid the red ant mounds and slippery hidden roots. We wound our way beneath the tangled mahogany canopy between the trees, following our guides for about an hour, crossing our fingers that we might catch a glimpse of the wild chimps. When suddenly, almost out of seemingly nowhere, there was a burst of shrieks, blood-curdling screams, hooting and crashing above our heads. We spent well over an hour with our necks craned and cramping, peering up at about 50 chimps, swinging, mating, shrieking, leaping, amongst all at the same time, pretty much, seemingly with no plan at all. We were absolutely surrounded by chimps in all directions. The above part was a little tricky for us as onlookers, as they crashed through the canopy with reckless abandon, tossing fruit peels, broken branches, and dispensing bodily fluids as they blindly dropped and swung from the sky. And then, as suddenly as they appeared, they disappeared, and they left us with our hearts pounding and our jaws dropped. That was my first email. So that was the wild chimp thing. The following day, we headed to Ngamba Island Sanctuary on Lake Victoria to see the orphan chimpanzees, which was a completely different experience that none of us will ever forget. The island sanctuary is 100 acres, and the surrounding water helps to prevent escapes. The handlers at Ngamba feed and provide veterinary care to the orphan chimps, but they are free to roam, forage, shriek, scream, leap, swing, and climb as they please until the evenings, when they are very happy to return to their compound to eat and sleep. We had the great privilege of being able to walk with 5 of the newly acclimatized chimps in the morning before the other 47 maniacs were released. When I asked the handler which chimp I would be walking with, she said, "Don't worry, it will pick you." And that's exactly what happened. A young chimp named Sarah immediately scampered up to me, reached up with open palms and fingers spread. Oh my God, it was really emotional. Just as a child would. Instinctively, I popped my hand under her bottom, and she leapt onto my hip and flung her hairy little arms around my neck. It felt absolutely human. After piggybacking and bouncing on me for a few hundred meters, she swung off me and raced up ahead to Annabelle, grabbed her tightly by the hand, and excitedly raced into the forest with Annabelle in tow, crouching. Wasn't sure if we were ever going to see her again. She emerged smiling ear to ear. One of the other larger chimpanzees, named Medina, about 75 pounds, really seemed to like my husband a whole lot. And in fact, was not at all too keen to share him with the others. There was one point where another chimp jumped. I was behind, so that was very funny. Another chimp jumped on Medina, who was on Richard, and Richard went flying backwards, and I was howling, not a very sympathetic life. Anyway, it didn't take us very long at all to learn that each one of these chimpanzees have individual personalities, expressions, and attitudes. Over the 3 days at the sanctuary, we watched them laugh, hug, kiss, touch, play, and smack each other on occasion, whether justifiable or not. We watched them share food and steal it. They are human in almost every imaginable way that you can possibly think of. In fact, is it 98.3% genetically that we're the same? I think some chimps are maybe more human than humans, but... One last story that I have to share, there are so many, is about a rescued circus chimp named Sunday. Not only did he walk upright like a human, which is sort of uncanny, he proved that he could mimic them most effectively. After days and weeks at the sanctuary, observing the local fishermen in the small boats fishing on the banks, Sunday decided to splash his way out to the boat and jump on it. The startled fisherman abandoned his vessel and ran to alert the handlers. By the time they'd all returned, Sunday was repeatedly pulling at the cord, attempting to start the boat. Fortunately, the boat was in. I guess that made the boat not go. And his escape was foiled. We were actually shown pictures. They were blurry, but we saw him, and his posture and the whole thing. So we know what happened. I've spoken for far too long. I could speak a lot longer, but you didn't buy tickets to hear me. I have a million other stories.
They will next time.
I don't think so. Okay. I'm in the foreplay for Jane. Suffice to say that I'm extremely enthusiastic about Jane and utterly inspired by her dedication to the preservation of the world's chimps and communities to support them. Without her total devotion and dedication, I'm not sure if we would have very many chimps at all. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my icon, Jane Goodall.
Thank you.
I'm the spotter.
Yes, thank you. And you know, after what you just said, I wasn't planning to do this, but I have to start with one story because it follows the story about Sunday. This was a team of Russian researchers, and they wanted to study. I'm not quite sure what they wanted to study, but they had this group of chimpanzees on an island, and they went out every day with their boat, a rowing boat, and studied whatever they wanted to study with the chimpanzees. Actually, I remembered what it was. They would give a chimpanzee, say, a seed, and the job of the chimp is to go and find a leaf of the tree that the seed came from. How much botany did they know? That was the study. And then in the evening, they would leave. So one day, they came to leave, and the boat was there, but there were no oars. The chimpanzee had taken the 2 oars up to the top of a tree. The researchers were stranded.
That is hilarious.
They somehow bribed the chimp to go and fetch the oars. It was some kind of delicious food. Anyway, I really wanted to start by thanking you all for coming, and thanking you, Angela, and your family, and for bringing your friends together and making this evening possible, and thanking Andrea and the JGI team, because without the team we wouldn't all be here today. It's a lot of work. And I also want to go back to the beginning for a moment, because I don't think I would be here if it hadn't been for something that happened in my childhood. It was pure luck, the luck of the draw. I had an amazing mother. And I've just met Angela's mother.
She's pretty amazing.
And I know you said so. So I was born loving animals. I think many people are. And I was really lucky in that I had a mother who supported this love of animals. And the story, some of you will know this, but I have to tell a couple of stories again for those who don't know it. I was 1.5 years old, and I don't remember this, but I was told it when my mother came up to my room and found I'd taken a whole handful of wriggling earthworms to bed with me. And obviously along with the worms, there was a whole lot of earth. And so many mothers would have got angry, but she just said very quietly, Jane, if you leave them here, they'll die because they need to be out in the garden, and we carried them back. And then this other story, which, you know, it's a well-known story, but it isn't always told in the way I want to tell it now. We lived in London. I was loving animals, but in London, big city, sparrows, pigeons, dogs, cats, you know, there's not that much wildlife. And so it was very exciting. I was 4.5, and we went for a holiday into the country to stay on a farm. Cows, pigs, horses. And in those days, there were no intensive factory farms, and the animals were out in the fields the way they should be. And I was given a job to help collect the hens' eggs, and again, there were no battery farms. So the hens were pecking around the farmyard, and they were supposed to lay their eggs in these little wooden hen houses, where they also slept at night to keep them safe from the foxes. So I was collecting these eggs, and you know, here's an egg, well, about like that. So apparently, I don't remember, but I began asking everybody, but where does the egg come out of the hen? Because I couldn't see a hole like that. Obviously, nobody answered me to my satisfaction. And I distinctly remember seeing a hen go up into her hen house and thinking, I'll find out now how she lays her egg. Crawled after her. Big mistake, squawks of fear, she flies out. And I'm only 4.5, but I so well remember thinking, this is a dangerous place, no hen will lay an egg here. And going into an empty hen house, I think there were about 5 of them, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting. And it was fine for me, but my poor family didn't know where I was. And it was, you know, the afternoon was moving into evening, and you can imagine how worried my mother was, out there searching. But when she sees this excited little girl running towards the house, instead of grabbing me, how dare you go up without telling us, don't you dare do it again, she saw my shining eyes and sat down to hear the wonderful story of how a hen lays an egg. And the reason I tell that story again and again is because if you look at it with hindsight, that's the making of a little scientist. There's the curiosity, asking questions, not getting the right answer, deciding to find out for yourself, making a mistake, not giving up, and learning patience. And all of that scientific curiosity might have been crushed, and I might never have done what I've done. She found books. So she decided that I would learn to read more quickly if she found books about animals. So she did. And this, growing up in the war in England, we had very little money. My father had gone off fighting. Mum and my sister and I had gone to live with